Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi rajiun. To him we belong and to him we return. Probably one of the most quoted verses of the Quran that we would have come across in the year 2020. Thoughts and prayers, condolences, rest in peace. These are all things that we've seen an unprecedented number of times, more than ever. But once it's said, once condolences are offered, then what? All that and more, straight after this.
Right, welcome back to another episode of Beardos Media. We're in season 2. This is episode 14, and another topic which is going beyond business and banter, and a topic which seems to be quite pertinent given the circumstances. We've had over the last 12 months an unprecedented number of people leave us, and it's become somewhat, I don't know, I mean, this is the question that came to mind. Has it become a norm to even see all these announcements of deaths on? You see, you quoted the verse of the Quran, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. To him we belong and to him we return. And this is something we used to see on social media posts once in a while, you know, once every few weeks. Unfortunately, right now it's become a situation where not a day goes by when you don't have to type those words as part of your condolences several times a day.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, multiple times a day. Yeah, definitely.
So, you know, I tell you what, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine last week on this very topic, and it got me thinking because, you know, this particular friend of mine is the kind of person who likes to reach out to people and offer their condolences, and she was expecting the same in return, right?
Okay.
And from people who were close to her, or she thought were close to her, and she couldn't understand why was it that right now people just don't seem to be bothered, you know? And through this conversation, I was trying to explain that we've got to look at the different dynamics of the situation. It's not that people aren't bothered. People handle these things in very different ways. Yeah. Some people want to be contacted. Some people want to have people calling them. Some people are good with calling others to offer their condolences. But some people don't have it in them to talk about it. Do you know what I mean? They just don't
I think
talk.
there's people on both sides that struggle to talk about it. Whether you've lost a loved one, or whether it's a friend or a contact who's lost a loved one, you don't know what to say. You don't know whether you should call. You don't know whether like a message suffices. Yeah, you know, it's just what to do at that time.
Yeah. But what to do? That's the question, isn't it? What to do?
This is the thing, isn't it? It's like your friend. What's right for her, obviously, is for her to reach out to people. To offer her condolences, to say, you know, if there's anything I can do, all of that. And naturally you'd think that the people that she associates with would know that. But I guess they're doing what's right for them. And is there really a right or wrong?
Well, this is the question. Is there a right or wrong? I don't think there's one right or wrong. I just think people handle it in different ways, don't they? I mean, look, if there's one certainty in life, it's death, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, yeah.
But even though we know that, when it comes round, how prepared are we to handle the news? Not of our own death, not how prepared are we of our own death. That's another question altogether. But how prepared are we to handle the news of someone leaving us forever? Can you ever be prepared?
No, I don't think you can.
Even though you know something's about to happen, that someone's about to leave us, you can have several days of that certainty, knowing that they've got no chance now. We've been told.
Yeah,
they've got just hours or days.
See, I often used to think about this, and it goes back to something that my dad would often say, and he still says it. He goes, I'd rather go while I'm still walking, talking, able.
Yeah.
And then we talk about people in the family or in the neighborhood going, or in the village, from back home, etc. Some, like an elder or someone, would pass away after a long stint bedridden. Or then like a youngster would pass away with zero illness, fit, healthy, gone.
Yeah. But we get that all the time. The elders always say this, Ya Allah, if I'm to leave, don't make me a mutaj before I leave. Don't make me a dependent.
That's exactly the
dependent on anyone before I leave. I'd like to go fit and healthy.
But the truth is, neither is easy. To lose someone suddenly is hard. But to see something coming from a mile off is, I wouldn't say it's easier. In the long run, because you could almost say that your sadness, your grief, maybe not your mourning, but your sadness starts way before, and you spend months or weeks of helplessness that there's nothing that you can do, and it's out of your control, and you can see what's coming.
The question I have is, has the increase in the number of deaths being announced somewhat made us become desensitized to the news of death?
Absolutely.
Do you reckon? Yeah,
I think so.
Does it not depend on proximity with who's passed away?
Yeah, I think that will always be a major factor. The thing is, we're hearing of a lot of deaths. Look, there's two sides of the coin. One, we've heard of a lot more deaths, a lot more. We've seen a lot more posts shared, a lot more notifications and notices put up. Right now, part of that is because more people are dying. Part of it is because they're being reported more, further and wider, and all of that. Is it easy? Is it desensitized? I think so. I see, and I can only speak for myself, and I'm sure the listeners will agree or disagree. If I hear of somebody passed away in London or Glasgow or wherever, how much does it really affect me?
So you're saying when there's more distance geographically, it affects you less?
Yes, I'll be honest. This year is the first time in my life I can recall being in autopilot when it comes to condolences.
So copy paste.
Sad
that it's come to that, right?
It really is. Because
really sad that it's come to that.
Because it's so much more than just a life lost. Someone's lost a father. Someone's lost
everything, and they felt they had to live for in this world. Yeah, whether it's a father, a mother, sibling. I know. Well, my is a dear sister, next door neighbor. She was in her 40s. Her kids. Her husband grew up with us, and her kids they go to the same schools, and we meet each other. We'll practically live out of each other's pockets, don't you? To a certain degree, when you have neighbors, you're that close. You share each other's happiness and sadness.
Neighbors are family, aren't they? That's your extended family.
Their grandmother passed away in the UK, just close by. Within weeks of her herself contracting the infection, the virus, and herself passing away in her 40s, right? A week and a half or so later, her younger sister, who's in her 30s, passes away. How do you comprehend something like that when you have multiple deaths within the same family, nucleus?
You just don't. I don't know how you can. I think the only thing for us that makes it marginally easy. I'm not saying it's easy by any stretch, but it's like you said, it's a certainty in life that everybody has to go.
Yeah.
When it was their time, it was their time. They were fit, they were well, they were healthy, and they weren't mataj, or they weren't. The way I deal with it is you always try and think of the other person. So, like, I'll always be at a loss when I lose something. And I'm sure everybody's the same. When you lose someone, you're going to be at a loss. You're going to feel it. You're going to wish they didn't have to go.
Yeah.
But then what's right for that person? You know, Islamically, theologically speaking for us, when it's written, right?
Yeah, when you gotta go, you gotta. When you're destined to go, you're destined to go, irrespective of how that comes about. You know that your life was written. I think that's for theists. There's some comfort in that. Yeah, I think there's people, at least, who follow the Abrahamic faith, Christianity, Judaism, Islam. There's a common belief there. You are destined to arrive at a certain time. You are destined to leave at a certain time. And you have an appointed time. And it's not the end. It's not the end. I think there's some level of comfort for people who are theists. I think the challenge here is when you have so many deaths that have been announced, and you're seeing these deaths being announced, and for some people who you have some certain proximity with, whether they're people within your community, family, friends, then as you said, it's a copy-paste thing most of the time. It's also almost become like a shortcut on your keyboard. You press a few letters and enter, enter the whole kind of shebang that you've pre-prepared.
It really does. I never thought that, those words my autocorrect would be picking it up or predicting it. Never thought it.
Yeah, and that's literally what it's come down to even. Yeah. So if you feel that we've become desensitized to death, to the concept of death, and for people losing loved ones, the question then arises, what's the right thing to do for you, and what's the right thing to do for those who have lost someone? For example, this friend that I was talking about and discussing how they felt upset and disappointed that they weren't getting the same kind of reaching out towards her from close people, like a phone call, as she would have normally expected. So I was explaining to her, look, there are people who would probably be uncomfortable even calling you.
I struggle with
they won't know what to say.
I struggle, especially if it's new. Look, we have this thing in Pakistani, perhaps Indian, subcontinental culture, even in the Bangladeshis, right, is that as soon as you hear of a passing, if you can't get there within minutes, you make a phone call. Yeah. Now, I often think the person on the other hand has also just lost someone. They're possibly still in the room or whatever. Yeah. They're getting phone call after phone call after phone call. Yeah. And it's customary to attend all these phone calls. Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to be this person to be putting someone in that position. I don't want to be in that position myself.
Someone's lost somebody. In that kind of a country, they will have the deceased with them at the time. Yeah. They're trying to arrange everything with the funeral, the burial, and everything else. Yeah. They are there themselves, digging out the graves physically themselves, going through that. They have to switch their emotions off. You're making phone calls to pass on your condolences because you feel that if I don't do it within this frame, then it could be held against me.
Yeah. You're thinking about yourself.
See, I don't give a crap what people think anymore when it comes to those things.
I think that's how it has to be.
Because I wouldn't want someone to call me within the first few hours. Personally, I know some people would.
Let's be honest. Yeah. It's a mentality that, such and such rang me, such and such, called straight away, such and such turned up straight away. The truth is, if you've just lost someone, the last thing you're doing is taking notes of who was the first to call and who spoke to you more and who did this and who,
Well, believe me, there will be people who do that. Trust me, I've come across some people who would go down to that kind of level and keep a kind of a mental log on who called me. He didn't even call me. She didn't even call me. This person didn't even call me.
I've always found that, I want to say fascinating because I can't think of any other word. Going to the funeral home or someone they've just lost someone, the bereaved household, on the second day, is frowned upon. It's like, why couldn't you get there sooner? Or if you're made to feel awkward if you've gone on the second or the third day.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, look, these people, they've got enough on their plate. They're really not going to be offended.
Yeah, let me ask you a question. Have you ever lost anybody close in recent years?
Yes. But I think not household.
Okay.
In fact, not even in the country.
Yeah.
Relationship-wise, very close. So my dad's brother passed away in Pakistan.
So the people who would be taking those most of those condolences would be his nucleus family, right?
Yes.
As opposed to you guys, because you're extended family. But you would have people passing condolences on to you who know you in the local area.
Yeah.
So my dad passed away, and it was a long time ago. In 3 days' time, it'll be 27 years exactly. In 3 days' time.
Wow, okay.
I was only 14 years old, right? At the time. Now, how I handled it then compared to if something like that was to happen to me now, and how I would handle it now, I think would be completely different. Mentally, because we mature, don't we? I mean, I've seen so many deaths throughout my life. I've been involved in, bathing the deceased and shrouding the deceased and burying the deceased. So many people who have passed away and fulfilling their final rites, people who are related to me and people who aren't even related to me. I think emotionally, we have a certain way of dealing with things, and some of this comes down to emotional intelligence. So when you have to switch off emotionally, when you have to do certain, to fulfill the rights of the deceased, you have to switch off emotionally to the best of your abilities. But I've seen, I as a child, I've seen children lose their parents. I myself was a child. I'd say, when I lost my father.
14 is a child, isn't it? What do you remember from the time? Like
everything.
Okay.
Every minute detail of how he passed away, what he was doing, what time of the morning it was, who was around me, what happened straight after, who came, everything is I've got a really bad memory, but some things that we say in NLP that you get anchored. There's an anchor. I can, I
it's okay.
You get back to that, and but I can remember everything. Were
you allowed to grieve at the time?
Well, I think in those days you'd get the whole community and family in your house. It was packed, and partially it was a case of making sure your guests were okay as well. And so the question, were you allowed to grieve? I would say yes and no, because they were there to comfort you, but then you felt there was an obligation on you to make sure your guests were okay.
Yeah, so and suddenly you're chief organizer, and there's so much to do, and everyone's looking at you.
Luckily I had elder siblings and stuff at the time who took charge.
What I'm saying is but
as the family, and this is one of the sad things I've seen in the Asian culture, when someone passes away and everybody start flocking in and becoming a burden on that family, especially within regions or countries where people can't afford to kind of host you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then they're expected to be fed, watered and bathed and all that kind of stuff whilst you're grieving, and you're not given that opportunity to grieve properly. And I find that really sad. To a degree, I'd say this lockdown situation is helpful for people like that, because they're not having to then host a whole load of other people in their homes. They're the ones who have lost somebody who's passed away, and then they're not expected to look after other people whilst this is happening.
I actually agree with you. I think this is the only time in history, well, you could go further back, but in our lifetimes, this is the only time where you'll get time to yourself as a unit, as a family, because of restrictions and everything else. And I think, subhanallah, there's hikmah, it makes sense. To have a bit of time to yourself, to not have to be worrying about catering, about guests, about moving the furniture so more people can get in, and all of this other stuff, clearing the neighbour's house, so there's male sit here, female sit here, everything else.
That's it. That's exactly what it was like for us.
It's crazy, isn't it?
It is, absolutely.
But there's pros and cons. I mean, some people will say now that they can't grieve together, with extended family and friends.
Not even extended family, their own family or the households.
That lived in different households,
Your own siblings, in different households, you can't get together.
Yeah.
And that is sad. I mean, I know of cases like, Amar One has tuned in. May Allah bless his father's soul who passed away
Ameen.
through COVID, last year. And he wrote a piece, and he was speaking on the ITV news because he was one of the first to be contacted by news, just because his dad was mashallah, was a significant figure in the community. And he was saying, do you understand what it feels like not to be able to embrace your own mother, Ali, to tell her, to comfort her with her husband and your father's no longer around? Can you just imagine that? You have to sit outside in the garden with your other siblings or relatives at a distance.
See, this is the other extreme, isn't it?
It is an extreme. It's a sad extreme, but
how have you seen people handle it this year? Because it's unknown to us, isn't it?
I've been contacted by families who are grieving or who have lost somebody, and for them, for the first day or so, it's kind of mainly to kind of get the logistics in place in the burial process and getting somebody to fulfill somebody's final rights, because obviously in the Islamic tradition we bury people straight away. After that, it's usually them just taking phone calls. I've realized the older generation, here's the other thing, the older generation, that they're taking phone calls between each other, because that's what they know. They're not on social media. I'm talking about in their 50s and 60s. They're not using social media for this kind of stuff, right? The younger generation, there's a bit of a difference in how they're handling it and how they're actually giving condolences. Some friends, people like Amar or people who are close to me, I've had phone calls from them, and I've made phone calls. And you'd reach out to a phone call if somebody this is what I was talking about, proximity. When there's not just geographical proximity, I'm thinking emotional and, relationship wise, that kind of proximity. And if you feel there's a proximity, you genuinely have love, respect and care for someone, you're going to take an extra step. You might have somebody wanting to say, okay, let's go for a walk outside, social distance, just for a 5-minute walk, just as an excuse to pass their condolences and see them, But I've noticed there's a difference between how the elder generation are handling the passing away of people and how the younger generation are handling it. The younger generation, for some of them, they feel, from what I've seen, and that it's okay. On social media, someone's put a post up. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, with so much sadness and a heavy heart, I've announced the passing of my mother or my father as returned to his Lord. And just to comment in that is enough for them. There are a few reasons. Because one, they feel that, we can't physically go and meet them. They may not have their number, so there's no physical place to go and see them. But I think the awkward thing is they don't know what else to say. If they call somebody, when you've usually let your elder generation do that, of source thing, the passing of the condolences with your relatives and stuff. Now I've had to do it for a very long time, so I've kind of gotten accustomed to the format of things.
But it's the awkward silences and the not knowing what to say.
But what do you say to somebody who's lost somebody so close? You've said, it was destined this way. Obviously, his time was up, or she's had a good life, mashallah. You guys have been raised well and everything. This is good deeds for them, for the good that they've done within their lifetime. What do you say after that?
I tell you what, that's I would say that's a healthy middle ground in itself, is literally just to leave it at that. I tell you what's difficult, and I've seen this over the years, is to be sat at the taziyat where everybody's sitting around, right? And the sheets are out and everything. And the person who's just lost, say, their mother, their father, their sibling, whatever, is just constantly taking call after call. Call after call after call. And even though everybody knows what happened, it was a heart attack, it was whatever, every person feels they need to ask.
How did it happen? What happened?
When did it happen? What was the time? Why? And this person will sit there, and because it's tradition, because it's customary, because it's always been done, will attend call after call saying, it was this time, this is what happened, this is what we did, this person was there, and then they'll put the phone on, and then next one, again and again and again. And I think I wouldn't say the youngsters are wrong in this. I think nobody wants to be on the phone for hours on end talking about the same thing. And then it goes even further. A lot of people will say, yeah, you know, I knew your dad from this, and we used to do this. And you're thinking, I've just lost my dad hours ago. And you guys are just calling me up, telling me stories of, there will be a time for that.
Ali, the thing is though, some people want to be called. This is the difference. You and I may be different. I think we're quite similar in that respect, but we may be different to the community of people who would prefer to be comforted with these calls. Some people need that human interaction. It's just, but that's fine. That's just the way they handle things. When this is what I was explaining to my friend, I said, look, some people don't like to. Me personally, the way I handle anything emotional, I switch off. I like to be left alone.
Yeah.
If I'm angry with somebody, if there's some, anything emotional, I need time out. I need time to myself. I want to be in my own thoughts. I want to assess things, reassess, or make some sense of whatever it is. When they talk about emotional intelligence, that's where this comes. I like to be left alone. I don't want to be bombarded with phone calls. I appreciate the gesture. If anything happens, and if I've lost an aunt or uncle or whatever, or cousins or whatever, I've appreciated the gesture. But one thing I don't like to be doing is taking phone call after phone call, just like you mentioned.
Formalities. That's the thing, isn't it? Yeah.
But I know people who feel that it's necessary for them to receive those phone calls.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that's okay for them. It's true also that they may be left disappointed.
There has to be a better way. Because have you seen the phone be passed around? So you'll get a phone call from someone, but then on the other end, there's like 6 people sat in the house, and each one individually has to speak to you, and each one will ask what happened, and each one will go through that whole procedure. And I'm thinking,
or when what they'll do is they'll call one person, they'll say somebody else around, you'll pass the phone around. They feel that it's a formality to do that of sorts, or pass their condolences to everybody who was related to that person in the household, even the little kids. Sometimes. And you're right. There's got to be a better way to do that. I mean, right now, if you think about the way it's being handled now, I think we do miss out on not being there physically for people to help them in their time of need. Maybe even getting involved in the shrouding and the bathing and the burial itself. Maybe that. But to be fair, with the number that the government's held, 30 maximum. I think that's a healthy number, because those people who are closest to the deceased
will
probably fit into around 30 anyway. Other people may want to be there.
How do you see this going in years to come? Say once COVID is behind us, do you see it going back to the way it was?
For our community, maybe not other communities. Maybe they'll learn from them. It's like digital mediums, for business and meetings. People will learn and say, okay, we've embraced digital medium now and the internet. Let's move forwards with this, because this is a lot more effective way of doing things. But I think when it comes to things like this, I think some people will be okay to just make phone calls and take phone calls. But some people will find that it's an obligation for them to be there physically. And I think to some degree it should be. For those who are close, like first, immediate family, it should be. And
that's the thing, though. If you've just lost someone and it's a loved one, you do want to know that people are there for you. You do want to know that you've got support and got a network.
To be honest, I don't mind. Me personally, I don't mind, but I know that's important for a lot of people.
It's having to go play through the hoops, all the extra formalities, all the extra kind of customary stuff and traditions, and kind of what will he say, what will she say stuff. And you just think the person doing it is not sincere. The person receiving it is just grieving. They don't really, So who's it all for, isn't it?
Exactly. Who is it for? It reminds me of a situation where there was a very important guy in a village, and that person's mother passed away. And this person was quite well known within his community and amongst some politicians as well. So there was a whole big crowd of, important dignitaries and politicians who came to see this man because his mother had passed away. And he had a small family. He had his wife and kids or whatever. And there was a big crowd that came to visit and pass their condolences. Shortly after, that man himself passes away. And guess what?
Nobody came.
Nobody turned up. So who do they do it for?
Yeah, I can see that.
You know what I mean? You get that extreme as well.
Yeah.
And this is why they say, you know what?
See, this is, and I don't know what it's like in other cultures, but I think in our culture, closure comes very late. You know, once the 3 or 4 days of mourning are over, and all the visiting and then phone calls and everything are stopped, I think that's when you get a chance to grieve.
Properly, because
And that's,
most people don't even want to be seen crying because of this kind of stigma around grown men crying. I
Not
tell you
see-
what, if I see a grown person crying, I can't help it but cry.
yeah.
I can't help it. I didn't used to be like that.
yeah.
You know, when you're younger, when you hear somebody or see somebody old crying, it doesn't make sense to you. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes you might even have a laugh because somebody sounds funny whilst they're crying. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's when you're a kid. But I tell you what, since I've grown up, and especially in the last 10 years, I think I've become really sensitive. You know,
Yeah.
when I see
Because the
somebody,
thing
a
is,
grown
look,
person crying, I think
it's-
partially you're sorry to cut you. Partially, I think is you're recalling your own pains. You're
Yeah.
recalling your own losses. I have to admit, whenever I see somebody who's lost their father,
yeah.
it brings it. Or I mean, even just
It's going to
today, I was getting emotional just thinking about that. But when I see that in somebody else, I break down. I just can't help it. You know, maybe it is a part of what I'm feeling for myself, and I know what this person's going to be going through,
Yeah.
and maybe it's other stuff. I mean, Hapsidu from Derby is saying grief is not a sign of weakness. However, in Asian culture, men don't grieve or cry, which causes further problems. I agree that it's an individual process, but we realize who truly supports us and who we matter to when in times of grief. Yeah, and I think, you know what, Haps, you're right. There is this kind of societal, environmental kind of pressure on men traditionally that grown men don't cry and stuff like that. But I think that's changed.
It has to change.
It has to change, and
The
I think
truth
it has
is,
changed.
Boys do cry.
Yeah,
Men cry.
Men cry.
In fact, you know what? And it's,
Re-
it's
you
the
know what?
worst time to be like controversial
Real
or
men
anything.
cry.
And I'm not trying
That's
to
it.
be intentionally controversial or anything, but it's just come to my mind that
Go on.
when a man cries,
Mm.
you know it's sincere, you know it's real. And I'll tell you why I'm saying this is because have you ever seen,
Because it goes beyond, breaks that kind of,
this is it.
yeah.
This is it, because he's not trying to
It's-
cry.
is gone beyond
And
his
I
own
don't know
control.
what it's like for other cultures. Yeah, again,
Mm.
I'm not going to pass comment as a blanket comment or generalize too much, but
That's
in
not
our culture,
very controversial, is it?
in
Go on.
our culture,
Yeah.
when women will be fine. They'll walk up to the house, they'll be chitty, chatty,
Oh
everything.
my goodness.
And then when
As
they walk
soon
into
as
that room,
they switch.
oh my god,
The band.
you think their dad had died or something.
Yeah.
And then
Oh my gosh. You know what? I've seen that. It amazes me how good acting skills they have, some of them.
fantastic.
I don't know if you can relate to
BAFTA.
this, yeah.
Yeah.
The Asians will definitely relate to this.
Yeah.
They'll be on the phone, they'll be having a laugh, they'll be watching a movie, and somebody calls and they have to switch it on.
Yeah.
They'll just switch it on and start crying like it's just happened now and it's happened to them,
Yeah.
like in really serious ways. And the Asian, I don't know, a lot of cultures have kind of moved on to that, but some people who still held on to it.
Yeah.
And it's the norm that when somebody comes to give you condolences, that you have to cry, and you hear it from them, and they say to you, well, if you don't cry, they think they didn't matter to you,
Yeah.
so you have to cry. And it's kind of admitting that they're putting it on.
And to be fair, I've seen women cry when they've not even met the person that passed away. It perplexes me because and to truly
Shouldn't laugh,
appreciate,
but it's true.
to truly appreciate how good this performance is, you have to see the follow up. 2 minutes from the time that they've gone shoulder to shoulder or whatever, and done their performance,
Yeah.
they sit down
Yeah.
and then they'll talk about why they chose to wear this color or where they bought that from and who they saw yesterday.
Exactly.
And it's just calm again, and you think,
Yeah. Wow.
what just happened?
It's literally like a button's been switched on
Yeah.
and off. Like,
But then give it 10
wow.
minutes and then somebody else will walk in.
and they'll cry again. But some people genuinely cry because they genuinely. But what we're referring to is a specific act, which has become a cultural thing, where within the Asian, the Asian women. Again, I appreciate what you're saying.
There's actually paid performers that you can get now.
Really?
And I know that there is,
Wow.
it's a thing in parts of Africa as well, which I came across by chance. But in sort of India and Pakistan, you can pay professionals to kind of mourn in grief, like really loud, but
Wow.
in tune.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. You know what? On the note of sharing emotions and crying, I put this post up in my Facebook group, the Inner Circle Facebook group for my members yesterday. And I have to admit, it was so warming to have people sharing comments which themselves were so sincere, and you could feel the love between them. Almost like, I know your father's passed away, my father also passed away. A couple of my friends whose father's Imran, and
it always means more from someone who's
going through the same experience.
It really is,
And it was so warming to see that. I actually really felt there's like a warm fuzzy feeling, thinking, alhamdulillah, it's beautiful to see people sharing this, and I can appreciate that. That sharing of the love, sharing of emotion, sharing. It's like, problem shared is a problem halved, as they say. It may not be halved, but to even
but there's
share
truth in
those
that, because
words.
it's human nature to feel that way when you feel someone can actually relate to you. When someone, and they say nobody can feel my pain, but when somebody has felt that same pain, it's just so much more coming from them. It's words can't really describe.
It's as the saying goes, doesn't it? You really don't know until you've been through it yourself.
Through it.
And I can appreciate that. I think there's two things here that I wanted to kind of put forward. There's one thing is, when we've got so many deaths occurring within communities and people we know being announced and stuff, there's also this conundrum of how much of the good news do you share? Like, if you've got something good to share, you've achieved something, or somebody who has achieved something, there's something to celebrate. People are feeling guilty for sharing news which they will be celebrating while somebody else has lost somebody. In the past, I've done that. I've kind of refrained from posting certain things because I know somebody who'd passed away close to me, and I thought, it won't be appropriate.
That's a good point, actually, because we used to be a lot more sensitive. I've seen weddings cancelled. Not because someone in their household passed away, but somebody
in
nearby,
the village,
or in the village, or
the
in
town,
the neighborhood.
I
I think we've lost that element somewhat. And it goes back to
that family
becoming
won't say
desensitized.
anything. Yeah, that family won't say anything. They will say, "Look, go ahead. You've spent a lot of money. You spent thousands and thousands of pounds to get this sorted. Just go ahead."
Yeah.
But no, you feel that pain genuinely and sincerely.
Well, the thing is, there's levels to it, isn't there?
Yeah.
If you know that one of your neighbors has just lost a loved one, and you had like the Bhangra band booked and fireworks and everything, you could cancel the entire affair, the wedding, the whatever it was, the graduation party, or you could go ahead with a little bit more modesty, simplicity. Maybe just don't do the fireworks. Maybe don't have the dances, or
just
whatever.
do the simple rituals and
Or you could just postpone the whole thing. I think we're fast coming to a time where people will ask the grieving family, "Look, is it okay if we, And obviously the family's going to say, "No, it's fine, do your thing," It's, and then that, I don't know if it comes off their conscience or whatever, and then they'll go ahead with it.
Perhaps again, is saying, in Asian cultures we have traditions that need to be carried out, but as you've said, who are they actually for? The attendees, the families. Sincerity goes a long way. A close friend's dad passed away a few years ago, and he was a prominent member of the community, and there were thousands of people at his funeral. That blew me away. Sometimes families of prominent person, in inverted commas, that has died almost feel obligated to do this. I totally agree that it is 100% for men to cry and show emotion. Absolutely, Habs. This is and that also shows, like you said, Ali, there are levels to how much you refrain from showing or celebrating. And when you've got prominent people doing something versus somebody who's an average person doing something, I think that sometimes comes into play, doesn't it? It sometimes does come into play. You think, well, it was such a family. couldn't you have kind of, don't you want them to be happy, and we understand you've lost somebody. But you're saying, look, I'm not saying anything. Go ahead. I'm not even stopping you, but they kind of want you to kind of be the ones pushing them to do what they think is the right thing to do, or for that particular family. So, I mean, somebody yesterday was saying that they do feel guilty for sharing positive news or celebrations when somebody else has passed away. When somebody's grieving, you don't go on do a dance on their grave. Do you know what I mean? It's that kind of an analogy that they kind of used. So it's a tricky one, Ali, to be honest with you. I think this particular situation and these circumstances have brought to light some of the flaws within our communities, in our traditional way of doing things. And if we don't reassess them and overcome them and move forwards in a positive way, then what I think that in itself is a big loss.
Yeah, it'd be such a shame if we just go back to and adopt everything that was wrong with our society and our culture. Grieving has to be done. It really does, whether it's
Absolutely.
by yourself, whether it's, with loved ones. I guess the person that's grieving is the only one that can answer that.
There's another thing, though. I think everybody needs to grieve in some way, and everybody does grieve in some way. How they grieve...
Not everybody, though.
No, that's what I mean. How they grieve will be very different.
Yeah.
I think they do, but in their own way. They may not show it. You may not know that. You may not think they are, but I think people grieve in different ways. And even they may not think that's called grief with what they're doing. Sometimes they display certain characteristics in their behavior, or they start behaving irrationally or erratically. And that's a kind of a reaction, and sometimes a response to how you grieve, right? I think the danger is when you don't know how far that's going to take you in your grief, and you go way beyond in your grief, and you go so deep that it takes you to the edge where it becomes dangerous.
Yeah.
That's when grief isn't a good thing. Grieving is definitely a good thing, but it has to be in...
It's a process, isn't it?
It's a process, yeah. But, Ali, if you've got somebody who's grieving, and you'll not be the one to want to say, okay, come on, stop now.
That's enough, yeah.
That's enough. You can't.
I think you have to be sometimes.
Yeah.
Look, I've seen both extremes. I've seen people remember and mention on a daily basis someone who's passed away 2-3 years ago. Daily basis.
Yeah.
Every single day.
Yeah.
Which I think is unhealthy.
It is, yes.
Because you've got to remember there's other people trying to get on with their lives. There's kids growing up in that home. They've got to be allowed, because they're not going to have their childhood again.
Exactly.
And that's their development stages. It's very important for them. I've seen people block it out, completely not acknowledge it, try to go back to work, the next day, and just not even, no mention, no grieving, no crying, nothing done, no closure. It's very important to have some form of closure.
Yeah.
If you could grieve for years and not have closure, not great.
What do you mean? Yeah, here's the question. How do you interpret? I agree with closure, but how do you interpret closure? What is closure when it comes to grieving?
I think it's coming to terms with what's happened.
Okay.
I'm probably over
simplifying. But I agree.
The thing is, look, if you lost somebody years ago, and everything has to remind you of them all the time, and it has to be said in the house. Oh, they used to like to eat this. They used to like to do this. If they were here, this. If they were here, that. It's unhealthy after a certain point. And then at the same time, if you've tried to block it out completely,
that can be unhealthy.
In either sense, closure is not there, is it?
No.
If you've not dealt with it,
because you're not
ready
there's
to.
No real admission there.
This is the thing. It's not an option to not be ready to deal with it. It's it's gonna imbalance something somewhere. I
don't think it's an option thing at all. I don't think options even come into that equation. Not to be ready or not to be ready. I don't think anybody's ever ready, ever.
Yeah.
I think,
but the thing is,
it's how you personally handle it emotionally within yourself, which determines whether you're bringing it and bringing that to a closure, or you are making that admission that you're coming to terms with, I accept this has happened, I know this has happened, I understand this has happened. And depending on who else is going to be affected by how you respond will depend on how quickly those stages also take place. For most people.
Yeah.
Because you might get a spouse who's lost their spouse, right? You might get a husband who lost his wife, or wife lost her husband, but there are kids involved. You know, for the sake of the kids, you're going to have to pick yourself up. Yeah. And grief isn't only on death, is it?
No.
Grief can be from losing or breaking up of a relationship.
Yeah.
That can bring grief as well. Somebody doing some harm to you or your family, that can bring grief. Or some other, it could be a financially related kind of situation that's taken place, which dumps you into grief. It could be all sorts of things. It could be a social thing. In this situation, we're obviously referring to what's going on around us right now, with so many people passing away and so many deaths being announced. You know what's also sad? When people don't admit that there are more people passing away, to kind of stick with their conspiracy.
Oh, the conspiracy theorists.
Yeah.
To be fair, I was probably one of those people, up to a certain extent. But there comes a point where you have to can it. People are losing loved ones.
Yeah.
Know what, every time, and I have to admit, most people are respectful in that sense. They won't mention it at the time, on the day, whatever. But you just have to put that to a side. Whether you agree with the government narrative, whether you disagree, whether you think something else is going on behind the scenes or a smoke screen, forget all of that. People are losing loved ones.
At least be sensitive to them. Because I've seen people who have announced that somebody's passing away, or they've actually mentioned exactly what we mentioned at the beginning of this particular podcast show. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. To him we belong and to him we return. A verse of the Quran which has been recited or kind of shared on social media so many times every day that it's become like a copy paste thing. And people have gone into there to comment and say, a lot more people are wanting to share that news now, and they're blaming it on COVID. Do you know what I mean? Or whatever. And that's insensitive. That is totally insensitive.
Yeah.
Imran is asking, are we saying that there is a right way and wrong way to cope with grief and loss? No, Imran. We're saying quite the opposite.
I'd say there is.
No.
It varies for person to person, but there's,
I guess in that, I think if I'm thinking correctly, if I'm getting what you're thinking, I think you're referring to the extreme ends of the grief, right? And if you're going completely blocking off, or if you're going beyond what's healthy in terms of grief.
I've lost someone that I love. Yeah. Now I'm Asian, so I now have to cater for 200 people turning up at my house. I have to attend phone call after phone call after phone call. I have to do this. I have to do that. I have to meet and greet, and I have to do the whole shoulder to shoulder cry thing with 200 people and everything else. For me, that's completely wrong. I haven't been allowed to grieve. Yes. So
this is all going to be subjective.
This is what it is. So is there a right way or a wrong way? I'd say there is. There's different ways and
for different people.
For different people.
Yes.
This is it.
But there's not on an objective level. Objectively, we can't say there's a right and wrong way.
Oh no, of course not.
I think the only time we can say that is if that grief is taking you into a negative space. On either extremes, either when you are not grieving at all, when there is no admission being made and accepting of what's happening, or on the other hand of the scale, where you've made that admission, you've accepted it, but you're kind of reminding yourself and everyone around you all the time for lengthy periods of times. That's not healthy either. That can be unhealthy for people around you. So that's when it can be a wrong way, subjectively speaking, of dealing with losing.
It can be unhealthy if you choose to do it a certain way, or just not to do it at all. But each person will know what's right for them. The most important thing is that they have to be able to admit, firstly to themselves, and then to those around them.
I would just like to say, anybody who's connected with me or Ali, I'm sure he will be happy to do this as well. And if he's not, I'll have a word with him. I'm sure he will. I'm just joking. because perhaps bringing up the subject that rightfully, there are challenges within Asian men in particular in being able to grieve properly. If anybody's going through a situation where they feel that they need to speak to someone and there is a moment of grief or they don't know how to handle themselves, I'm more than happy for you to contact me privately, personally.
Yeah, definitely.
And as I said, Ali would be as well. So whoever you feel more comfortable with and you feel you want to talk to someone, we're happy to have a chat with you. There is absolutely every reason to grieve when losing somebody close.
Yeah.
There's no even it's not even a case of saying there's nothing wrong with grieving. That in itself would be wrong.
Yeah.
That I would go to the extent of saying there's absolutely every reason to grieve in a healthy way for your own health.
Yeah.
For your own mental health, physical health as well as mental health. We forget how often this has a massive impact on people's mental health. I think for me, the bottom line is people will grieve in different ways.
Yeah.
People will have different ways of reaching out to those who are grieving. For those who are grieving, I would say please don't put it against people who haven't fulfilled your expectations of making possibly even a phone call, unless there is a real close proximity in your relationship, where the minimum they should have done is make a phone call. Don't hold it against some people, because people genuinely are feeling really confused right now. They don't know how to handle certain situations. They don't know how to handle the news of death. They've never been in, most of us, in fact, all of us, I'd say, have never been in a situation like this where so many deaths have been announced. If people have acknowledged your post on social media and even put into the comment section, please accept my condolences, or they've passed their condolences, even in the comment section, that alone should suffice. If there's not that close relationship proximity, don't say just because you've been in that kind of connection with them, they should have called. Even if it's some of your friends, if they've called, or even if they've just sent you a nice message, just that's enough. People really are struggling to understand what's happening. They're struggling to understand how to approach it. They're struggling to understand how to pass on condolences. People are struggling on understanding how to receive condolences. And I would say right now people aren't in a very good headspace. We're in 2021 in January, and we're in the middle of a global pandemic where we've lost so many young lives as well as old. In the last few days, a number of deaths that I've come to know of within our local community, people within their 30s and 40s. That's not normal. People don't know how to handle that. People don't know how to kind of move forwards from that, how to process that, how to accept that. So I think for those people who would normally say, this person didn't even contact me, this person didn't even call me, let it be, man. Just let it be. People probably having a hard time comprehending it themselves. Yeah. On how to process.
And I think that's another thing that we don't think about, isn't it? Is because just because the person that passed is closer to you doesn't mean it wasn't difficult for other people.
Exactly. I
mean, if you don't look at just the blood relation, just because it was your sibling, doesn't mean it's less difficult for his best friend.
Yes.
And he should be the one to call you.
Yeah.
This is what you were saying earlier about proximity, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's not always blood relations. It's not always geographical.
No, you might not even know.
Yeah, it's feeling of closeness.
We won't even know how close people's relationships were sometimes.
Exactly.
But look, it does work both ways. You've got family, loved ones, friends around you. They don't stop being there just because you've had a death in the family and they haven't called you or texted you straight away. They're still those same people. And these people, so they are still at the end of the phone. Maybe they're trying to give you space. Maybe they've seen how difficult it is. Maybe they went through the same thing themselves. Point being is you can pick up the phone and call them.
Exactly. To be honest, I'm that way inclined. If somebody's passed away, I'd rather not call them straight away. I feel
I wouldn't.
Yeah, I feel.
I'll drop a message. Say, look,
Yeah.
if you need anything, if you need, if you need to talk, whatever.
And I appreciate you will have lots going on right now.
Definitely,
I just wanted you to know that I'm here for you if you need anything. But I will definitely give you a call once things are a little bit more settled. You know what I mean? But in the meantime, in the interim, if there's anything,
that's how it should be. It should be left to the person grieving to decide what's best for them. Let's wipe the slate clean. Let's get away with the template of the way that it's done.
Yeah, exactly.
And let that person decide how they need to deal with it, how they need to come to terms with it.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what's healthy for them.
I think the challenge here is sometimes you'll have people who aren't that well versed with the systems and the processes which need to be fulfilled for them to fulfill the rights of the deceased, in which case they will need external help, in which case they will always have people within the community who are willing to step up and help, and I think we need to appreciate that as well. When you talk about key workers, I think sometimes we don't give credit to the volunteers in our community who I would class as key workers, who are there for the deceased family, who help in the shrouding and the bathing of the deceased, getting the funeral services together. There's so many gems in our community.
They really are. They are unsung heroes, honestly.
Very much so. Unsung heroes is a perfect way to put it, because they are there when you most need somebody. They take everything out of your hands in terms of the bureaucracy, the red tape, the formalities, and they understand the systems and processes, and they get involved as a small team. They'll be there offering you advice. They'll be there trying to, they'll get the death certificates and the coroners and the funeral services sorted, the burial processes sorted, the arrangement of the funeral itself, the hearse, everything. They get everything sorted. I don't think we give them as much credit as is due, So if that's you out there, alhamdulillah, well done to you, and keep up the great work, because may Allah bless you in all sorts of ways. And
I mean, inshallah, those are the people that are doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah, because they're not getting paid.
They're
volunteers.
Their sincerity,
you cannot doubt their sincerity. Absolutely not, because they're not doing it for recognition. They don't put it on Facebook. Oh, today we buried this person. Today I wanted to watch this person's. But they don't do any of that.
No.
They're in the background. They're working hard. They'll do the collections.
Yeah.
They'll visit the families whenever it's possible. Obviously, they'll get involved with arranging the right people to be involved with the preparations, and and they're the people who really, really deserve credit out of this. I think on behalf of me, on a final note, for those people who have lost loved ones through this pandemic, may Allah make it easy for you. May He give you guys and everybody else, and may He give us all the strength to cope with loss and bereavement. I think, as Ali mentioned at the beginning, as theists, there is some comfort in understanding that this is not the end of the journey. This was just a portion of the journey. The real journey begins afterwards, and we get reunited. We often cry or mourn our own losses rather than
we're crying for ourselves, aren't we?
For ourselves, yes. We may feel the pain of those who have also lost, but there is an eternal life outside of this life, and that is the truth. What we have here, as the Quran describes, is an illusion. And for theists, I guess, as I mentioned, it's probably a little bit easier to comprehend what's going on, or to seek some form of comfort in what's happening. But generally speaking, for everybody who's lost someone out there, my heart goes out to you. May you have strength and deal with this. And if there is anything we, as the Beardos, can do for you guys, feel free to give us a shout. There's no benefit in suffering. We all need to grieve, and if that grief turns into suffering, then that's when we need to kind of reach out and say, we need to.
You're allowed to grieve. It's perfectly natural. In fact, it's unnatural not to grieve. So you do it however you need to. Forget about the stereotypes. Forget about everything else. Be brave enough and bold enough to say, look, guys, I need a bit of space, or I need to talk to someone, or I just need to go for a walk. Whatever it is.
That's it. Yeah.
And just remember, like everything before this too shall pass.
This too shall pass.
You know, to him we belong, and to him we will return.
We return.
I think that's about it from us this week. Inshallah, next week we'll be wrapping up season 2, so we should have another cracker of a show for you. You know, keep listening, keep downloading the podcast, keep following us and all the...
Yeah, so those of you who don't know, we're everywhere now. But one thing we want to do as of season 3, when season 3 starts, we want to be projecting or, you know, broadcasting this directly into our group rather than just our personal profiles, because a lot of people say they kind of missed it, and we want to kind of streamline the broadcasting services. So those of you who are listening to this and those of you who have been following us, you know, God bless you. Thank you very much for your support. You know, we genuinely appreciate it. If you haven't done already, do join the group, the Beardos Media Facebook group, because that's where you'll be getting most of, you know, all the broadcasts as of season 3. Plus, we might drop in some exclusive content, which we're thinking of producing as well. So you might want to you might want to join that group. Yeah. Other than that, we're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, whatever else. Well, so there's loads about them out there. We're on everything.
Everywhere.
You'll find us anywhere. We're everywhere. Is that it from you, Ali?
That's it from me.
God bless everyone. Thank you for tuning in, and inshallah we'll see you on the next one.
Inshallah.